Hi everybody and welcome to Matrix Live, Season 9, Episode 26. Coming to you live from Chiswick House Rose Garden, where I was sitting underneath the monkey puzzle tree behind me when I realised that we probably don't have a Matrix Live recorded for this week, and that I might as well do something useful with my life and quickly record one. Apologies for the background noise of the endemic parakeets of West London. And if anybody finds this place vaguely familiar, it's because the Beatles recorded the video for Paperback Writer here about 50 years ago. Anyway, Matrix Live. What's been happening in Matrix this week? I guess immediately sort of top of mind is the fact that I spontaneously decided to release the pre-release Git repository for Synapse onto matrix.org GitHub account for comedy value. I don't know if this is of interest to anybody but me, but when we first released Synapse in late or mid-August 2014, we flattened all the development that we'd done to that date on an internal Git repository and did a sort of big bang release of something that vaguely worked. So until this day, nobody has seen the rather embarrassing series of commits that happened between June and August 10 years ago, as people frantically scrambled to put together the first draft of both Synapse, converging from the client-server API, the server-server API, and the bit in the middle, and also the first ever Matrix client, Matrix Console, written by yours truly. And I thought it might be interesting, not least because we are 2 days away from the 10th anniversary of the mission in which the Matrix core team in London went to Matrix core team to be in France, in Rennes, and we sat down and had a 2-day workshop and basically sketched out what Matrix would be in a way that terrifyingly is basically the same as it stands today, except nowadays it exists and even works some of the time. So I thought a little silly 10-year birthday present would be to release this in case anybody is interested in it. Other stuff going on is that we are starting to hit possibly the beginning of the endgame, at least in my opinion, for getting Element X and Rust SDK up to parity with the old apps and indeed beyond. One of the interesting things happening is that we have actually begun, as of I guess last week, the task of simplifying sliding sync and getting it natively implemented in Synapse. I think I've mentioned before many times now that sliding sync might be a little bit over-engineered in reality. This is entirely my fault. I had the genius idea of making something that would try for an optimal ordering of rooms on the server, which would then paginate those rooms and slide them down to the client, and the client will slide up and down as the user scrolls its UI and go and have basically the most responsive interface possible, shamelessly taking inspiration from Discord. At the time, transparently, this was inspired by some use cases which didn't have end-to-end encryption. So specifically really low bandwidth environments where you probably don't, well, first of all, you're on a trusted network, and secondly, you don't want to waste bits doing AES and other packing. So instead, basically the problem to be solved originally for sliding sync was if you're on a super low bandwidth network, you obviously don't want to do like 100 megabyte JSON download of an initial sync if you're logging in, and you certainly don't want to do like a 10 megabyte incremental sync on a big account. You only want to shift the data that the client cares about, which is fine if it's all unencrypted and the server can figure out what the most recent stuff is. But the embarrassing problem that we've ended up with on sliding sync is that the server does not know the correct ordering of the rooms because it cannot see the encrypted messages in them, and it does not know which messages will be visible to the client, and therefore it cannot correctly calculate that order. So it can guess based on timestamp and the events that it can see, but then the client has to go and kind of fix up that ordering. And if you start sliding around on the client, you need to keep the window on the client in sync with the wrong window on the server, and it becomes incredibly fragile with two different sources of truth. So that's what we are now addressing, a little bit on the late side, but better late than never, by basically throwing away the sliding bit of sliding sync and ordering things reverse chronologically on the server, getting the client to order itself and do all the sort of fine-tuning locally. So we still trickle in the room list incrementally, sliding it into the client. We still have all the other benefits of sliding sync, but we just don't have this fancy Discord style window. Instead, it assumes that you're basically start at the top of the list and then it gradually paginates it in the background. So it uses more bandwidth, but it ends up being more responsive and, well, not more responsive, but probably as responsive as classic sliding sync. And it's a hell of a lot simpler to implement, which is why we are jumping ahead to, well, probably implementing it in the proxy for compatibility perhaps, but certainly also looking at the native implementation on Synapse immediately. Now, I can hear people, particularly Nico, screaming at me, wanting to know where the MSC and the proto-MSC is of sliding sync, or simplified sliding sync as it's being dubbed. And the reality is that we're iterating super fast on this, trying to check that we're not doing yet another dead end on sync, and want to check that the idea is sound before we formally write up anything for people to pull to shreds. Now, there will still be adequate opportunity for everybody to review this and tell us we got it wrong, and this time we will listen hard. But still, given the amount of strong feelings and strong voices that people have on the subject, we want to get some code down first before going and sharing the draft API. However, I can spoil it a bit and say that, as I said, we're removing the sliding windows, we're keeping the shape roughly the same. The other nice thing we're doing is splitting the sync loop in two, having one half for end-to-end encryption data only, which also helps with dehydrated devices, and then the other half for non-end-to-end encrypted sort of room list updates. So watch the space to see how that goes, but it's kind of exciting that the initial work has kicked off on that, and we will share as soon as we possibly can. Other good stuff going on in the sort of Element X endgame includes powerlinks. At last we can join rooms on Element X. It even hooks into the matrix.2 deep link URI handler. You can permalink to any event in any room anywhere. You can click through on user IDs and event IDs and matrix IDs, and you can even click through on the replies, so you can hop through the reply chain either on a thread or on a normal set of replies, and it makes the app infinitely more usable and was an enormous amount of work. Other stuff though is obviously tweaking the sync stuff so that it does client-side ordering, and also we need to flesh out the caching layer so that it actually persists an offline cache of what's going on rather than just being a kind of pass-through cache as it is today. What else can I tell you? QR code login, absolutely epic. Hopefully you saw the video in Hugh's demo last week, but it is absolutely transformational to be able to log in now by just scanning a QR code that will shift all of your end-to-end encryption state, including your backup and your main identity, onto the new device. And you don't even need to pick the server that you connect to. You don't need to enter your username. You don't need to find your password or your end-to-end encryption passphrase or recovery key or recovery passphrase or whatever we call it. So this is, I don't know, one of the first times I've had a fuzzy, warm feeling that we are coming up to speed with the Discords and indeed the Signals and WhatsApps of this world in terms of providing a super simple way to onboard people, and one that is compatible with OIDC. So again, sort of benefits of our brave new OpenID Connect single sign-on world being realised in terms of giving the infrastructure by which one can log in at a moment's notice just by scanning a QR code. So that's big. What other fun stuff is happening? Can't really think of anything. Everything else is lots of polish, making stuff better across the board. I'm sure I'm forgetting some really embarrassingly obvious stuff. But in terms of major milestones, that's at least what I've been looking at this week. So there we go. Hopefully somebody hasn't already recorded a different Matrix live and this can be useful for something. I hope you have an amazing weekend and that the weather is as good as it is here. Bye.